Welcome to her comeback. I'm so glad you're back with me. This is where 50 isn't your finish line. It is your starting point, the starting point of everything you want your life to be, the person that you are meant to be. I'm your host, Michelle Thompson, and we are proving that your best chapter may just be the one you haven't written yet. We'll continue each episode featuring honest conversation with women who have stopped going at it alone and have found their way to fulfillment, joy, and purpose in their second act. You'll hear about their struggles, their breakthroughs, and the practical steps that they took to create lives that they actually love. This podcast will show you how other women have made their comeback and how you can too. Welcome back. Welcome to her comeback. I am your host, Michelle Thompson, and I'm so glad that you're back with me again this week. I decided to do something a little different. We're about halfway through our episodes with season 2, and I decided that I wanted to share something with you. I have finished writing my book. Yay, I'm so excited. It's been such an amazing experience. And now I have still in front of me that publishing process. So there's a whole lot more to come on that, and you'll be hearing more over the coming weeks. But I wanted to share with you a little excerpt and talk a little bit about something that I talk about in the book that I really have not talked about on the show up to this point. And in fact, I almost didn't have it at all in my book. The topic of spirituality was not at all something that I had included in my original book outline when I started. And I wanted to keep it that way because I guess my initial thoughts was that the minute you say spirituality, or maybe even worse, God, people lean in one way or another, or they're out the door. So just before I go any further in this, just let me say very clearly, I'm not here to preach. This is not anything like that. I'm not here to convert or tell you what to believe or suggest what path is right for you. I grew up a preacher's kid, and trust me, I had enough of that in my lifetime. So what I am here to do is to share something that's just deeply personal, something that, if I'm being completely honest, has been truly the greatest transformation in my life. And I think wherever you land on the spectrum of faith, religion, skepticism, or somewhere in between, there's something in this conversation for you, because it's not really about God. It's about the beliefs that we carry, sometimes for decades, that were really never ours to begin with. It's about what happens when you finally give yourself permission to question them. So just take a breath, stay open, and let's just walk through some of this together. So, in Eckhart Tolle's book, The Power of Now, he speaks about how the use of the word God evokes such powerful emotion, ranging from great conviction to just a complete denial of such a presence. And the moment that the word is even uttered, there's often a mental image that's created of something or someone outside of you. And then it begs the question, how does this image help or hinder you in enabling your experience? And there's truly no word that can capture it. We as finite beings cannot comprehend infinite. We may try to put God in a box, so to speak, something that we can contain, that we can define with form, but it's not possible. At least that's been my experience. I'll talk just a little bit about where I started in my journey here, and then just how far I've come along the way. As I mentioned, I was a preacher's kid, and we were independent Baptist. Those Southern Baptists were a little bit too liberal for us. And I was in church services 3 times a week. I played the piano. I sang in ensembles. I did youth group activities, Sunday school. It was just being fully immersed
in the church environment. And that's the way I grew up. And I rarely missed a service. There was a not in any way subtle expectation that if you were the preacher's kid, you had to be perfect. And if you weren't perfect, people love to tattle on preacher's kids too. You do something wrong, and somehow, always, it got back to my father. So that kind of grew up in that around that type of stuff. But in the church itself, there was always one thing that just rattled me to the core, and that was just the hypocrisy. I just hated it. I felt like I've got to be perfect all the time and show up in my Sunday best, and other people come in here and they're just here for 1, 2 hours tops, and they go back to living whatever life they had before they came in the doors. And sometimes that looked like Sunday sermon and sometimes it didn't. And maybe I was a little bit jealous of that. I'd like to be able to be that way or have those options. And then there were church politics. Oh my goodness. Those showed up in so many forms. There was petty infighting over the color of the church carpet or the pew cushions, just gossip and personal agendas and divided interest and just a lack of trust and transparency. And then you can't forget about the Jimmy Swaggarts of the world that preached furiously about the sins of adultery and all the while falling prey to that primal human instinct. Just many, many situations over the years that I could describe. And while I talk about some of these things in less than positive light, I must also acknowledge that there were some really good people in the church as well, salt of the earth type people. They were kind, loving, faithful, supportive. And it was because of people like them that my father stayed in the ministry for 20 years. But after he retired, it was after my senior year in high school, and I was going off to college. And I really had made a decision at that point that that's pretty much done with church. I'd been there for the last 18 years of my life, and I'd done my time. That's just not something that I was interested in doing anymore. And for me at the time, I saw church, God, spirituality, religion, all of those words were like the same thing. There was no differentiation in those. And it was all fear based. We were sinful. If we didn't do what we needed to do, go to hell. And it was just this fear based. And then if you wanted to be in God's will, you needed to surrender your life to God. And then that meant you'd have to be a preacher, preacher's wife, or a missionary. You got to go to Africa or some other far corner of the earth. That's how I interpreted all of that. That may have not really been what was said, but that's what I heard. And so I interpreted that if I surrendered to God's will, then because I didn't want to do any of those things like preacher's wife and missionary, and I didn't want to do any of those things. So then God's will was going to be something I wouldn't like. And that's what I internalized. And that belief carried me for like decades, believing that whatever God wanted for my life and whatever God's will was for my life, I wasn't going to like it. There was a time when I was single mom, my kids were young, some really low points that I had. I thought, okay, God must be punishing me, not going to church or not doing these things. So I started to feel like as bad things happened, that this was punishment. And nothing really changed in terms of those beliefs until I got into the rooms of 12-step recovery. And off the bat, there was the use of the word God. And then, in fact, the very first group support meeting that I went to was actually held in a church. And oh my goodness, I just thought, this is a deal breaker. This program is not going to work for me. I went back. This is when I was in a treatment facility, and I wrote my therapist saying, this is just not going to work. I don't do church. I don't do God. This program's not going to work for me. And so when we met and she kind of listened to my diatribe, she said, Michelle, you're in luck, because there are actually some of these group meetings that are not in church. So you don't have to go to a church. And I was like, okay, well, that's good news. And then she said, as far as God, you really can get your own concept of that. All you need to believe is that there is a higher power, a greater presence than you, and it's not you, that there is something greater. She's like, that's really all you have to believe. I was like, okay, well, maybe, yeah, I'm sure there is a greater spirit out there. I was willing to believe just enough to keep me curious, I guess. Just as like, okay, well, let me just see where this all goes. And it was during the same period that I heard for the first time a differentiation between religion and spirituality. Again, as I mentioned, I just always thought those were the same. But there's a Native American author, Vine Deloria Jr. He's a theologian, historian, activist as well. And one of his famous quotes is, religion is for people who are afraid of going to hell. Spirituality is for those who've already been there. Provocative, right? And I understand what I interpret to be the thoughts behind it, that people that follow certain religious rules and rituals and doctrines, that they do it primarily out of fear. And then there's others that have had their own personal sufferings, whether what's some type of trauma or addiction or just other types of losses. And they're not really motivated to spirituality by fear of suffering because they've suffered so much already. And that concept of just making a distinction between those, it really gave me a much broader perspective, and it challenged me to ask why I believed what I believed and whether faith came from fear or from just a genuine inner searching. And over the next months, even into the next couple of years, I continued to maintain the belief that there's definitely a higher power. There is a power that's greater than me. And I could see that power working in other people's life. I hadn't yet connected it to me, but I could definitely agree that power was at work in other people's life. That worked for a while. And then as life went on, challenging times hit home, life shows up. And I found that, okay, that concept of what I had thought about how it works for others, it's not working for me anymore. It had never become personal, and I could no longer keep that God of my understanding or God of my misunderstanding. I couldn't keep it at arm's length anymore. I had to take on something more meaningful. My mentor took me back in some steps in the program where we talk about defining the qualities of our higher power. And she said, okay, is your higher power healing? Is your higher power punishing or forgiving? Loving or mean? Judgmental or accepting? All of those types of things. And she just reinforced that the decision was mine to make. The choice was mine to make. I just needed to make that connection with something that was personal to me. And this kind of started me on a new path, again, continuing to open my perspective to possibilities of how I can maintain a relationship with that God of my understanding. And I started giving more consideration to all of the many blessings and the good things that I had. I could clearly see at this point, there's many gifts, many blessings, and I'm just grateful for the good things that I have. And I could look and say, now, didn't a loving power have a hand in all those things too? I really began to hold on to that. And I still would go back and forth over the next couple of years. And I'd give God the credit for the good stuff. But when things went wrong, my initial response was still just to blame God. And then I'd get mad at God. And I would try to talk myself down from that position to see other perspectives that just I wasn't seeing. And then I'd ask others who had these beliefs, how do you not get mad at God? How are you not angry that this happened to you? This was really bad. And all of them pretty much said the same thing. They just said that they have their own track record where that they've seen for themselves over the years that when those bad things did happen, somehow it worked out okay. There was something good that came of it. And then sometimes the things that worked out for the better that were much more than they ever could have imagined. And that was fascinating to me. I was fascinated by that But I still would just question. I was like, well, if God is all powerful, omnipotent, yet bad things happen, how is it not his fault? Didn't he allow it? I still just struggled with that. And also, I held on to that belief I mentioned a few minutes ago, that underlying belief that whatever God's will was for my life, I wasn't going to like it. So I'm continuing as best I can to run my life in the direction that I feel like I should be running it, fueled on my own self sufficiency. And how is any single mom out there? How are you anything but self sufficient? Like for your own well being, the well being of your children, your life, it depends on it. Your life depends on it. I am the most self sufficient, motivated, running the show single mom out there. One day, I just hit a wall with everything. I had just had it with everyone, everything in my life, all I was doing to try to make the best of the situation. And things were just not going according to plan. They just weren't working out. And I even, it's like questions like, well, maybe these recovery groups I've been going to, that just isn't working. I would just question the whole thing. Maybe these spiritual principles just aren't going to work after all. And then I went and had a conversation with my mentor at the time. And she said, well, perhaps, Michelle, you need to do some more time in your meditation practice. She noted that I didn't seem to be getting the benefits from practicing mindfulness and getting quiet and being open to the guidance of a higher presence in my life. No, and that was no real shocker because I didn't have a meditation practice to get those benefits from. So that was pretty clear there. And the thing with this particular person, when I met her years earlier, she had gone on a meditation retreat. It was for 10 days. And during the time, you could not speak, you could not talk to the people around you. And it consisted of these 10 days of sitting in meditation, like more than 12 hours a day. You'd get breaks for like meals and a bathroom, that kind of stuff. But it was long days of meditation, and there were no cell phones, there's no contact with the outside world. I mean, can you imagine? Yeah. When I met her and she went through that whole experience, I was like, oh, I'll never do that. Well, this was now about 4 years later. I'm asking her about that very same retreat. And I was so disgusted with my life. And I thought that, okay, maybe going away for this meditation retreat is a good idea for me. I've been going at this thing on my own. I've had enough. I felt like that old Calgon commercial, the Calgon take me away, that I was having one of those moments. So I went, but the meditation retreat was nothing like the Calgon commercial, let me tell you. Once again, I kind of managed to get myself into something I had no idea what I was really getting myself into. I have a way of doing that. And the first couple of days were actually okay. I actually did feel some relief from just being quiet for a couple of days and clearing that headspace that I'd been in. But then it got exponentially harder. Oh my goodness. The more I sat with myself, the more things would come up. And as things come up, it was part of the practice that you practice releasing those things and practicing equanimity within your body and the different sensations that you would feel, and acknowledge things rising and passing away, that kind of impermanence of rising and passing away. So there's a real methodology to all of it, if you will. Well, by the 8th day, we were no longer in group meditation. We had been up in a group up to that point. But on the 8th day, we went to the individual cells in the pagoda. There's like these small closets where you would go and sit, and then you'd practice your meditation alone. Like you're in solitary confinement there, practicing your meditation alone. And something happened that day. I had this powerful, just overwhelming sense, a profound realization that I can no longer go at my life alone. I have got to have spiritual help. I need a loving, healing spirit to guide me and to help me through. As for whatever life brought my way. And I just kind of said the prayer, like that, asking that higher presence, just please stay with me no matter what. I don't want to ever be alone. Please stay with me. And it truly, it was another transformation there. So not only after completing that retreat, from that point on, meditation truly became a regular recurrence in my routine. But I also have a new understanding of that divine presence in my life. And I knew it was a spiritual relationship that I wanted and needed in my life. So as the years followed that, I continued to approach life using the spiritual framework, spiritual principles, but now really having that individual relationship with the spiritual presence. And when my plans didn't work, I kind of yield to Spirit's plan, acknowledging that there's a better way. I just need to trust and have faith that in what's to come, that it's okay. And what happened is as I strengthened that relationship and my own spirituality strengthened, I began to see my own track record. I think I had my own track record all along, but I couldn't see it. Now I really began to see it like, oh my goodness, now I can look at those things that happened then, and they were awful, but what somehow it worked out. And maybe there's a few of them that I can say, oh, how it worked out was actually a gift. That was the best thing that could have happened to me. And so I saw that there and I knew it. And I could see that my higher power had never left me. My higher power had always been there and through the ups and downs of everything. Corrie ten Boom, she's non-Jewish and she's a Dutch woman from the 1940s. She was arrested by the Nazis with her family for hiding Jewish people, Jewish families in her home during the Holocaust. She was imprisoned and eventually she was in the Ravensbrück concentration camp. And during this time, through it all, the extreme cruelty and torture, she never lost her faith in God. And she believed that God was there with her in the midst of the persecution. And one of her famous quotes, she says that there is no pit so deep that God's love is not deeper still. So despite the loss of her father and her sister in those camps, in those death camps, upon the release, she made it out alive. She continued her spiritual walk. She continued practicing love and forgiveness and helping others heal. Just a really amazing lady. And then there's another lady, Dr. Edith Eger. She is a renowned psychologist and survivor of Auschwitz. She wrote a heartfelt, inspirational memoir, The Choice, Embrace the Possible. And it's about surviving trauma, rising above, and choosing to create the life you want. While in captivity, Dr. Eger acknowledged there were those who, like her own sister, had lost her faith. They said, how could God let this happen? And she understood what they meant. She understood where they were coming from. But from her perspective, she never found it difficult to believe that it wasn't God who was killing them. God didn't run the death camps. People did. She pictured God being like a dancing child that's lively, innocent, curious. And if she wanted to be close to God now, she must be as well. So she wondered if there was anyone who knew that she was there. She wondered if her parents could see her. She wondered if anybody else knew what was going on there. She wondered. She convinced herself that her worst transgression would be to relinquish that curiosity. So certainly for most of us, our circumstances in life are nowhere near the suffering of these horrific camps, but the same principles apply. Dr. Eger said she wanted people to hear her story and to think, what if she can do it? I can too. In her clinical experience and practice, she dedicated her life to helping others transcend their life circumstances. She wrote about taking risk, making choices, embracing fears so that we're not imprisoned by them. And she also talked about how the greatest prison walls are not made of concrete or steel or any other man-made materials, but rather they're the construct of one's own mind. She believed that as long as we courageously took action, walked through fear, that we would discover possibilities we never knew existed. So today, I don't blame or get angry at God when bad things happen. I know today that I too have a choice. Through the most recent spiritually challenging times that I've been in, starting a new business and all the uncertainty and fears that are involved in that, I've learned that when my plan's not working, I need to let go and just trust that greater plan that's in play. I do my best to remain willing and open to what the universe brings my way. And as long as I'm doing my part and the best that I can do, I'm just going to trust the outcome to my higher power. And it's a daily spiritual practice for me. Daily humility, ego deflation, and acceptance that I do not, nor could I possibly have all the answers. And while I can only see the stitches of the pattern that's right in front of me today, I believe my creator can see the whole tapestry and how it all comes together. And outcomes are often out of my hands. My role is to continue to show up and do my best and trust that God's going to do for me the things that I can't do for myself. And if the results that I get today are not what I want, I can still trust that things are happening as they should and continue to ask Spirit for guidance and direction. Ultimately, things will work out and they may not look at all what I imagined, but that's okay. Far too often, I sell myself short of what's possible. I know that in letting go, there's opportunities for doors to open to even greater things. And this can be really hard work for a self-sufficient control freak, right? Believe me. Yeah, I spent years in pain in problems of my own making because I refused to accept and practice these simple principles. There's a Zen proverb that says, let go or be dragged. I I can identify with that because it's been in my clinging to whether it's an attachment, a resentment, or just a resistance to what is. It is those things that have caused my pain and suffering. It is through redefining my relationship with the divine that my life today is immensely better than it ever has been. And it doesn't make life easier, it just makes it deeper and more meaningful. And I no longer look to the future with fear and uncertainty. Most days, everybody has bad days, but most days I don't. And I face each day just for today with courage. And I ask my higher power to take away those fears and to relieve me of the need to know for my outcomes and just help me do what's in front of me. And those are the only things that are in my control, is just what's in front of me today, and just trust that things will work out. So I practiced a daily meditation, a prayer. I read spiritual readings. I journal my thoughts and reflections. Journaling gives me clarity, and it gets everything that's kind of wadded up in my head onto paper and helps me organize it so that I can understand it and kind of grasp what's going on there. This is really important practices for me. And so I don't live today with these gripping outcomes or bracing for disappointment. I live willing to trust, willing to let go of control, willing to believe that even when I can't see the whole tapestry, there is a loving presence that's weaving the threads that I don't yet understand. And at this stage of my life, I don't need the certainty. What I know I need is connection. And in choosing faith, I've discovered something I'd been searching for all along, and that's that I was never walking alone. And I'm going to continue to walk forward, guided, supported, and open. And I invite you to do the same. Redefine the divine for you, for yourself. Release what no longer serves you. Build a relationship with a higher being that strengthens you, not scares you. Step into the second half of your life anchored in faith, not fear. There's a life that's waiting for you that requires nothing less. I have a few questions that I just want to close with, and you can think about these in the coming weeks and see where you fall with some of these questions. In terms of re-examining your old beliefs, what's a long-held spiritual or religious belief that's shaped your life? Which ones might be worth re-examining? Have they held you back? And then in terms of religion versus spirituality, how would you define the difference between the two? Where do you land on that spectrum? What is your concept of a higher power? If you give yourself the freedom, the permission to define your higher power on your terms, what qualities does it have? Has that concept changed over time? And then how are you doing in surrendering control? I talked about my struggles with it. Can you relate to that tension between self-reliance and surrender? Is there an area in your life right now where letting go might open new doors? And then what about your own personal track record? Can you look back at a difficult chapter in your life and see how it may have worked out differently, maybe better than you expected at the time, that there was something good that came from it? Think about those things. Thank you so much for joining me today. And I'm glad that we were able to talk about a topic that we usually don't talk about. And thank you for being willing just to be open and think about these things with me. I so look forward to seeing you again next week with another podcast episode. Until then, this is Her Comeback. I hope this conversation inspired you to keep moving forward no matter where you are in your own journey. If you love this episode, I'd be so grateful if you would subscribe to the show on my YouTube channel at Michelle Thompson Life Coaching. Go there for more encouragement, insights, and just real talk about making a comeback happen. Hit that subscribe button so you never miss new content. You can also visit hercomebackpodcast.com for notes, resources, connect with me, connect with other women in our amazing community who are rewriting their stories. Remember, your setback isn't your final chapter. It's just the setup for your greatest comeback yet. I'll see you next time. Until then.